Not only was it amazing, it was so much fun. I mean, we would wake up and be on the river in a boat, looking at crocodiles and finding the elephants that had moved the night before. And you know what I mean? So it was really cool.
It seems crazy to think that I lie in bed and I hear chimpanzees screaming at each other sometimes. I hear elephants knocking down trees. And I thought, how can I use this to promote the destination?
I'm building a company called Aquera, and Aquera is a SaaS platform that's going to radically change the economics of local and community-based tourism. And it's going to do that by empowering community-based tourism organizations all around the world to gain global market access.
Our company, Kinti, it's a small company to promote the community-based experience and authentic experience with indigenous and Afro communities. But we work always with blind people, like support blind guides in Ecuador.
And I work in tourism, and it's exciting that I'm really pushing more into the responsible and sustainable side, something that I've always been passionate about. But what's interesting now is there's more demand for it.
I work for a Southeast Asian travel company. I come from a people and culture background, do a lot of learning and development, leadership development, but sustainability has always been a real big part of our business.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Founders Hub Berlin, a podcast where I sit down with members of our awesome community here in Berlin and we talk about their founder journey. I'm your host, Surab. I run an AI development agency, and I created this amazing community called Founders Hub Berlin, where we design and create multiple of co-working events for early stage founders to work together and network. So if you're curious about what we do, make sure to check us out. In this episode, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different than our usual topics, but also a very important topic in our daily life. In the past, we talked about how AI can be developed sustainably and consciously towards the better of mankind. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about something similar, which is sustainable travel and how travel is actually impacting local communities. So when is the last time you wondered how is your travel choices is actually impacting the communities in these travel places? If you never had this question before, you're not alone. I also haven't asked this myself in a long time until I met these awesome thought leaders in the space. And that's why we decided to maybe educate the people. I will be educated first, of course, about this whole topic. And we're going to be discussing how the technology and how the new pace of the world is actually changing the way travel is impacting these communities. For this, I have 4 awesome thought leaders in this space that have done either something in this community-based traveling, and we're going to be entering this conversation. So for this, I would love to introduce maybe first Daniela. This is going to be a first round of introduction for people to get to know you. What are you actually doing? What are you working on? Can you please give us a short introduction about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for kicking off the podcast. I'm excited to be here today. So my name is Danielle Finch, and I'm originally from the US, but I'm living in Berlin since 2020. While my background has historically been in corporate digital transformation, I entered the sustainable travel space at the beginning of this year. I'm building a company called Aquera, and Aquera is a SaaS platform that's going to radically change the economics of local and community-based tourism. And it's going to do that by empowering community-based tourism organizations all around the world to gain global market access. And I'll stop there because I'm currently in the field. Actually, I'm joining from Kigali, Rwanda, and working with CBTOs here. So I'm with these communities 24/7. So I have lots to say, but I'm excited to be here and also be joined by some really cool people that I've managed to meet through different industry events and that are representing different parts of the world. So really, really excited to be here with you all today.
Oh, thank you so much and very welcome to this panel. I would love to continue with Liz. Can you tell us a little bit about also what brought you into here and what you've been up to for the past maybe year or two?
Of course. Thank you so much for this time, Daniela, Sarah. My name is Liz from Ecuador, but actually I live in Portugal. Our company, Kinti, it's a small company to promote the community-based experience and authentic experience with indigenous and Afro communities. But we work always with blind people, like support blind guides in Ecuador. It's really important for us to try to promote this small experience because for us it's really important to connect with authentic places and with authentic experience in the places. Actually, we want to internationally work with this type of experience and authentic experience in Latin America and Europe. And yeah, this is our background.
This is super awesome. Didn't fully get, what do you do with the blind people? So you do kind of like events with them? We will definitely go more deeper later, but it's just out of curiosity, like I haven't heard this in such a long time. It's very interesting.
Of course, for us, it's really important to put put the blind people in the center for the experience. Actually, they are the guides in some place in Ecuador, for example, in forests, in the historical parts, in waterfalls. We have a different experience that team buildings or maybe show the different part for the history. And when the people have this experience, feel really nice information, and you disconnect for the typical things like the cell phone, the another sounds, and your another senses is like really more improve. You can improve your senses. It's really interesting because we are the first company in Ecuador that do that. Yeah, it's hard too because, in maybe Latin America, the inclusion is a little bit more slow than Europe, but we are growing.
Awesome. Well, love this. This is a very interesting concept. And now I would love to also switch the table to Charlotte. Can you also give us a little bit background about what you've been doing recently?
Hello, everyone. Good morning, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this webinar. I'm here in Kampala in Uganda on Lake Victoria, and I work in tourism. And it's exciting that I'm really pushing more into the responsible and sustainable side, something that I've always been passionate about. But what's interesting now is there's more demand for it. So we can really be more creative in our work and really focus on the kind of projects that we want to support. So my full name is Charlotte Beauvoisin. I'm British, living in Uganda 16 years now. I came here on a 2-year contract, but as soon as I came here, I fell in love. I'm sure Danielle knows exactly why, because we met here the other day. I know she's had an amazing time here and got lots to share with us. So I'm a marketing manager by training. I'm a blogger, I'm a podcaster, and I train the tourism business in how to be more sustainable. As I say, that's exciting now that there's a demand for that from Europe in particular and from the US. So we can actually really put pressure on the tour operators to change their itineraries to get people to slow down and have more interaction with the community. So yeah, look forward to talking about a few of those themes with everyone this morning.
Amazing. Also amazing background. Yeah, last but not least, Natalie, would love to hear a little bit more about you.
Thank you very much for having me here this morning or this evening, wherever you are. I'm Natalie and I live in the southern states of Australia. That's why it's dark and it's very cold. But I work for a Southeast Asian travel company and I have been living in Asia for the last 10 years. And at the end of COVID, I had to come back to my home country, but I still work remotely through the region, which is really exciting. I come from a people and culture background, do a lot of learning and development, leadership development, but sustainability has always been a real big part of our business. And I'm really excited that now more people, there is that demand that Charlotte spoke about and the customers want more. And that means that we can put more back into the communities and build them up and really use travel as a force for good rather than a force to decimate communities. So that's who I am. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. I'm also feeling very humbled by all these amazing backgrounds and this socially driven missions that you're all on. This feels really refreshing. I've been also hanging out with startup founders and people who trying to build things, but one of the main things on their mind is like profit. That's how all businesses work. So it's also really interesting to hear other perspective where like the main focus shouldn't be always profit, but how to empower communities and how to enable small other communities to also become part of this, like the humans should be the center of whatever we're doing. And it is super, super exciting. Thank you all for the introduction. I think everybody love a origin story and you all have very different backgrounds. We have also a lot of different continents. So I would love to hear a little bit about why did you enter this field? Maybe a little bit of origin story. Maybe we can start with you, Daniela. I know you're starting a company that you said is going to change the economics of this industry. Maybe can you elaborate more? What do you mean by that? And how did you end up in this travel industry, actually?
Yeah, sure. So happy to share. My journey in this industry actually started last March. So I mentioned I was working before in corporate digital transformation, but I was in the travel industry for the past 7 years. But at the time, working fully for profit, like you said. And actually, I was on a trip that took me to Malaysian Borneo. And that's where I discovered community-based tourism for the first time. I discovered it on accident. Like many community-based tourism organizations, they were randomly on Google Maps, but they had this amazing 4.9 star review in the middle of the jungle. And I was like, hey, I've got to check that out. So I say that because that's how all of us found this place, right? It was a bit off the beaten path, but the experience there was amazing. So this was an organization that had started by offering just homestays and then built up enough capital to buy boats to then do boat safaris. and then built enough capital to build small huts and offered package tours. And this community was not only generating income locally for the individuals involved with tourism, but, and this is what defines community-based tourism, they were also taking 10 to 15% of the profits and reinvesting it into the community. So whether that's infrastructure, education, food, they were doing all of that. And it had taken some time, but this organization was truly, truly amazing. And I just spent, not only was it amazing, it was so much fun. I mean, we would wake up and be on the river in a boat, looking at crocodiles and finding the elephants that had moved the night before. And you know what I mean? So it was really cool. And also what I realized is I could only be there thanks to this community, right? If you say, here's a boat, drive down the river, don't be eaten by a crocodile, and make sure you don't come across an elephant, like I surely would have died. So it was very amazing to like have this experience with this community as well. So I got, to be honest, I got back to my laptop and I Googled what is community-based tourism. I saw an article by Intrepid, who not only operates out of your part of the world, and realized that, yeah, it's a model that's been around for a while, but the market penetration is just not there yet. And so I came up with this idea for Aquera. It's where I, a background again, working in specifically in the vacation rentals before, but in the tech space, I started thinking, hey, why don't we have something like a channel manager for community-based tourism organizations, but not just a channel manager, also a part of with a platform that helps give them the tools and upskilling and training that they need to develop a superior product. So combining what's historically been done by NGOs with the training piece with the market access piece is actually something that has never been done before. And so I started just doing this as a side project. I entered a social entrepreneurship competition in tourism. And quite frankly, by the time I made the business case, I was like, I think this could work. So quit my job, which was very scary for a type A business school graduate to do. I had never done something that risky before. And my friends know how much that took for me to get there. But yeah. So basically, that's what started this path. And the reason, maybe just one last comment on the mission statement as you asked this as well. The belief is that business can be for good, right? I've grown up working with companies like Salesforce that have used their business revenue for good. And that's what really inspired me. And so here we can make a very successful business model that is just reallocating some of the $11 trillion in the travel industry to these community-based tourism organizations. So I'm confident in that. Still early in the journey, but yeah, that's how I got into it. And we've been having a lot of really good success and momentum so far. So I'm very, very excited.
That's really awesome. Where do you see this going? Like, what is your vision? You want to become like a global kind of movement where you enable for different communities, or you see this like for very specific countries where this can work out?
Good question. So absolutely the vision is to build it global with a specific focus on the global south. So Asia, Africa, and South America, where a lot of the community-based tourism is taking place. I think there's a power and strength in making it global. And so that's one thing I got exposed to when I was working for Michelin. I was in charge of digitally transforming the customer experience around the world. And I saw there was like great power when some of our customer service reps in South Africa were also talking to our customer service reps in Cambodia. And so creating that global network of strength is something I want to do. And so we hope to be very, very global and working with some of these amazing organizations that are here, but then also, that we've been meeting along the way.
That sounds so awesome. I wish you all the luck. Sounds like a great mission. I would love to move to Charlotte. I saw that you did a lot of things. You said you're a podcaster, you write blogs. Also, you have a very interesting company name. Was it the Diary of what? Could you tell us a little bit more about your blog?
Yeah, it's a Diary of a Mzungu.
Yes.
A Mzungu is what a white person gets called in East Africa. It's not a bad thing. It just means we look different and we sound different. It's from the Kiswahili. So as Daniel would have been called a Mzungu several hundred times already. So yeah, apparently it's what we look like. The first white people who came here looked dazed and confused, and it means you're sort of walking around in a circle. And so anyway, you have to embrace it. You get called Mzungu all the time. Good morning. Hello, Mzungu. How are you? And I found this word when I was moving from London. I had a corporate job, 9-to-5 job. I came to Uganda as a volunteer in 2009, and I had a 2-year contract. I was fundraising to help stop elephant poaching and to work with remote local communities on the edge of national parks who had elephants crossing into their fields and eating their crops. And I didn't know anything about Uganda. I'd heard of Idi Amin and I'd heard of Lake Victoria, and I knew there were gorillas somewhere, but I didn't even quite know where they were, even in Uganda or not. And So I started Googling, as you do when you travel, and this word Mzungu came up. And I just knew that I was going to get called it, like it or not. So that's what I call the blog. So the blog is about me and my life and the people that I meet here, mostly in Uganda, but also around Kenya and Rwanda, specifically in East Africa. And I started it for fun and now learned business based on that, because there wasn't much about Uganda online. In travel anyway. People write about the same things again and again, tour operators writing about gorillas and safaris, and that was just about it. But to have somebody who's an outsider come in and talk about places that weren't being written about yet was something that people really loved and gravitated towards. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun writing the blog, and that's given me a passport to do some really cool things like gorilla tracking. Oh, well, I won't tell you, you'll get jealous. Yeah, writing about a destination and podcasting can be really, really fun way to travel. And I came here as a volunteer, so I didn't really have any spare money anyways. It was a way to work my ticket, let's say. So I've traveled all around East Africa for fun and to write stories. But I've also got a chance to visit really cool projects. There's some community-based tourism projects, for example, in Watamu. There's a mangrove creek that supports the community. They catch crabs, for example, that they serve to tourists. And that's really thrived as a community-owned and community-run business. And so by going to Kenya, and it's fun, I come back with ideas and I can share them with businesses that I know here. So that's another benefit of what I can do through the blog. And then recently I launched the podcast. So the podcast is inspired by life on the edge of the national park. It seems crazy to think that I lie in bed and I hear chimpanzees screaming at each other sometimes. I hear elephants knocking down trees. And I thought, how can I use this to promote the destination? And I interview conservationists and travel writers as well, trying to give a different impression, because Uganda is very unknown. We tend to be in the news for all the wrong reasons. Very beautiful country, incredibly friendly, welcoming people, and so much to see and do. So I'm trying to do my little part to promote the region.
Oh, wow. This is amazing. And
do
you remember how long it has been since you left? You said you're originally from the UK, right? So how long has it been since you left?
2009. I think that's 16 years I've been here. I came for 2 years. When the plane landed in Entebbe Airport, it just felt right. There's something about the climate. It's one of the world's best climates. It's between 24 and 27 every day. So,
Sounds lovely.
Don't even have to think about putting on a jumper. For a British person, that's a really big deal, not having to worry about the weather every day. So the weather's ideal, super friendly. And yes, literally the day I got here, there were birds everywhere. Coming out into the airport, it was a car park full of vehicles, but there was a tree full of, 50 bright yellow birds. And I love birds and anything to do with bird life and conservation. It's just, paradise.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're making the people here in Berlin feel very, very jealous. We're technically in summer right now, but we've been having terrible weather. So this sounds like a dream, to be honest.
Northern Europe, yeah.
Yes, Europe is not doing so well with weather, but it's okay. We have other things.
Yeah,
thank you so much, Charlotte. I would love to go to Natalie. Can you also tell me a little bit about how did you get into the industry you're working in?
Sure. My origin story. So I saw travel as a ticket out of a small town growing up, and I wasn't tall enough to be an air hostess. So the next best thing was to be a travel agent. So I'm really fortunate to be part of quite a large travel company that really promotes brightness of future and movement within the company. So while I started selling travel in Australia, it then took me to the UK, which one day I was living in Scotland, my hair froze on the way to the station. I said, I cannot live in this country anymore, and got a job in Singapore. Never set foot in Singapore before, and it was interesting to start with, but then I ended up staying there for more than a decade and help building a business. I really love building things. I'm a bit of a fixer. So I like something when it's a little bit broken or needs to be rethought, redesigned, reshaped. And so I sold travel in Asia, but then I started to train people on how to sell travel in Asia. Then we needed to recruit people. So I kind of just fell into people and culture. And so much of what we do in Discover, as the brand that I work for, the company that I work for, is about community-based tourism. So even though I was working on sales, it was how do we explain to the customer what this product is? Because it's not your normal thing off the shelf. Yes, we do sell the normal holiday kind of stuff that people want, but a big part of what we do is trying to regenerate or make communities self-sufficient Yeah, I can talk a little bit about how we do that in a cycle, if you like. I really love it because it's a really different model. Businesses normally like to develop things and then hold on really tightly to them and not give them away because they've done so much investment. But we kind of flip that cycle a little bit. So we work with communities that are really willing to have tourism and want to develop community-based tourism in their area. We do a 1 to 2 year kind of discovery phase about, are they really on board? Do they understand what it means to have tourists or travelers come into their villages and their communities? Once they're on board, we then go into a transition period where we make sure that they have the skills and abilities and capabilities to deal with different traveler type, starting with the easiest, the young, the backpackers, educational groups that are really happy to sleep dorm style. And then as they get more developed and that community gets more capabilities, then they go into corporate groups or larger tour groups or a little bit of an older demographic that needs a few softer comforts in the community, I would say. And then once they get to that maturity level of about 5 to 10 years, we start thinking about how do we hand this infrastructure back to the community? Who's going to run the homestays or the restaurants? Do they have the people? And identifying that. So after a 10-year period, we can hand back that business, that economy that we've built to the local community. They've got the capability to keep going, and we go and then reinvest into another community project. It's, some people are like, well, then other companies could come in and pick up on, what you're doing. And I think that's a really selfish way to look at community development. We're trying to empower a community to be self-sufficient. And if they, want different type of travelers, now they've got the capabilities to make the decisions themselves. So I really love that flow that we start with the end in mind, that it will go back to the community. They just need a little bit of money, support, infrastructure to get it going, and then they can, take it off. So we're on about Community Project 24, I think, at the moment, which is really exciting through Southeast Asia.
Well, thank you so much also for this background. It's so interesting to hear these different stories that you don't really hear on a day-to-day basis. But I'm really pleased to hear that there are people actually working on these kind of problems, empowering these communities to be self-sufficient. That's also like really good mission to have. But before we move to the next topic, last but not least, Liz, how did you end up supporting blind people communities and all this mission that you also on?
Yeah, thank you. But my journey beginning with my grandparents, because when I was child, I really liked the land, but because my grandparents has a small land with some fruits, with some, vegetables, and I really connect with this type of different space because I'm growing up in Quito, in the capital, and have really is so easy to find this type of spaces. And then when try to look for a different experience with cultural experience, but when you have your grandparents' generations and when you find your father generation, you lose a lot. And when I know that, I really want to discover the small places with the old people and talk with the old people. And I beginning when this start is really hard because, Ecuador is a small country in South America, but Ecuador is unknown country. It's a few people knows about the country, and it's really, really hard to try to show the precious and rich things that I have. When beginning with the blind people before to COVID, because we in Kinti, we have a small internship program, but for students. And when we have application for one guide, but it's like almost 4 years, I'm really curious because all the time we have only students for the university, like he's 25, but for it's a really surprise for us. And when we talk with Jose told me, yeah, I'm blind, but I know tourism is a good tool to improve and teach the people and society about the empathy. And when we with all my team heard that is, yeah, because, for example, my grandfather have a small problem with his vision too. And I feel I really connect with the history. And when we in Ecuador, we don't have the old information. Maybe some government helps with this type of disabilities, of this type of problems or social problems. And I think with our small company, we are part for the society, but maybe we can do something. maybe we can to teach for the visitors, for the other people, and for the society in general. And I beginning with this sensorial experience, but this is only one product that I have, because we work with some women, with indigenous people, with Afro. We work with the small regenerative companies too, because when we are entrepreneurs and when you are in the small rural spaces, it's really difficult to show. Maybe you have some tools, maybe you have actually the AI and the internet, but actually in Ecuador we don't have, or the rural spaces don't have light or don't have internet. And you can do that. Maybe you need, for us, maybe we can be a bridge to connect these small communities, these small projects, these small people to show in our experience, because for us it's really important to create a lasting connection with the people, with the another places, with the visitors, but with the Ecuadorian people too, because for us it's really important to grow out the identity. We are really a rich country, but I have a really social politics problems. Maybe we can do a different things, and maybe we can do a small way to improve or fix small things in our country too, or maybe in our place.
Totally agree. I love that you connected this to your granddad as well, and you did something that also brought a little bit of history into what you're doing as well. And unfortunately, I also lost my grandparents when I was young, so I can understand how lovely this mission is for you, and just to feel this reconnection. And I would love to also ask a question, maybe in the round. So there's been a lot of really positive things that you guys are mentioning. It seems all good on, let's say, on paper. Obviously, every time we're trying to do something, then we hope we're doing the best. But usually there's also some unintentional harm that maybe we can cause to these communities. I would love to maybe hear some examples where you have maybe experienced something that was on paper good, but ended up maybe harming these communities, or through tourism, for example. Because I remember whenever I go somewhere that maybe hasn't been discovered yet, I remember Albania at some point, wasn't really discovered. I mean, it's not a really local community thing, but once it became an Instagram thing, out of nowhere, the prices started to be really inflated. And then the locals were a little bit getting annoyed that all the prices have been inflated by tourism. Did you guys experience such a thing also for the local communities, or it has been absolutely a positive impact? So maybe Daniela, do you have any insights on this?
Yeah, sure. So I can give one example. I'm currently in the company building phase, and as such, I'm working with CBTs across the globe. And so earlier this year, I was in northern Thailand in Mae Hong Son. So as part of that, I was staying in one of the villages where one of the Karen long neck tribes lives. And if you're not familiar with the story, these are the women that typically have golden rings around their neck. Oh, yeah. They're very beautiful. And so the story with that particular tribe or that area is that back in the 80s, a lot of people migrated from Myanmar due to the unrest happening there. The Thai government allowed them to stay there, but they said we will then profit off of the tourism that comes from this, right? Because people started hearing that there were long neck women in that part of Thailand, and then tourists started coming. So while on the one hand, it guaranteed that they could live there safely and stay settled there, also then created a bit of an exploitation, if I'm being super honest. And so that went on for a number of years until I believe it was a Dutch newspaper published an article saying, hey, let's be serious about what's going on here. This is not the best. And so that's, I think, a negative example of tourism, quite frankly, and basically turning this cultural practice into a human zoo. What I can say is the positive side of that is actually that's where community-based tourism came in. So that's why I was there working with the organization. They had worked with a Dutch organization called Fair Tourism Foundation to help them take ownership of the tourism. So yes, the government still gets a bit of the profit that comes from the boat that takes you across the river to go to the village. But other than that, the tourism is actually fully community-based tourism. And so it takes time. Like Liz mentioned, I think there's a lot of challenges in getting that model fully on the ground and operating. Billy mentioned this as well. But it's a success story now because they still do have tourism, but it's all fully owned and managed by the community. And actually, if you go there, you can not only take part in the tourism, but also see the school that was built out of tourism funds. Or when I was there, they were repaving a road that day out of tourism funds. So definitely is a tricky topic, but that's, I guess, why I've fallen so much in love with the community-based tourism model, because it's quite an antidote to situations like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like once they become in charge of whatever these things that they want to promote or the activities that they're doing, that, it's like in a little bit better hand. You minimize the exploitation, you minimize all these dangers that could fall into that trap. So that's a very good example. Maybe Charlotte, do you have also other examples where on the other side, where things were, because of this tourism, these communities were flourishing actually, and it became such a positive movement in that country?
I mean, many communities benefit from tourism. They have jobs, for example, but we are starting to be much more critical about the kind of jobs those are. Are we just giving people money to survive on, or are we really investing in their health and their local facilities? Because generally speaking, the community has more rubbish, has more noise, has people coming and going and having some kind of impact, changing the community. And that's not really addressed. It's one of the invisible burdens of tourism, as we call it. But of course, yes, if I go to some of the remote areas of Uganda, and I actually live on the edge of a place called Kibale National Park, which is famous for chimp tracking and some other tourist activities, you can certainly see that there are more houses. There are a better standard of houses. And that's directly because people are driving tourists around, and they're rangers working with the Uganda Wildlife Authority, and they're working in lodges as well. But are they the owners of these projects? Is it a sustainable revenue? There's lots of questions that we're starting to look at now. I love tourism, and I think there are so many different positive facets of it. Exchanging ideas, people are exposed to some of the knowledge that we take for granted living in the West. People improve their language skills, simple things like that. I'm very aware of the negative impacts that happen when we're not planning how to promote a destination and how to manage a destination. Because the trading centres near where I live, there's a lot of begging. I, as a white person, can't walk down the road without the kids saying, Mzungu, Mzungu, how are you? Which all sounds very fun until I answer them and they say, give me money, give me sweetie, give me this, that and the other. That annoys me because I actually live there. That's partly it. But also it leads to a point where I wouldn't want to get out of a vehicle. I would want to just stay in my lodge, do my activity, go back to my lodge. Now, if I do that, the chances are that it's an international businessman or a Kampala businessman, and it's normally men, but not exclusively, who are taking the profit from me staying in the lodge and me traveling in a vehicle. So I think it's a real loss for the community, because it means I'm not going to the local stand to buy my tomatoes or buy my chapati and spend my little bits of money. I would rather go to the safety of the lodge where I don't have the hassle. And it's a shame. And we see it all around the world. It's not unique to this particular part of the country. This comes from a lack of planning and a lack of discipline as well, because this is not a good experience for the tourists, and it's not really good for the community as a whole, because then you see what happens when children get easy money. Some of them drop out of school, and then the young girls are much more likely to get pregnant at a younger age, and that's not good for them, and that's not good for the whole generation, the whole community. I've got many positive things to say about tourism, but I see in a developing country like Uganda, things grow very quickly without any thought of the negative impacts. And we're only starting to look at them now. So there's so many.
And how would you raise awareness into this to make it right, like to make tourism being done the right way?
It's about speaking to everyone either side of the value chain. It's about educating the tourists that, you might feel good giving a sweet to a kid, but there's actually that locks into a bigger pattern of behavior that's generally negative. And it's also about talking to the parents as well. Don't push your kid towards me asking me for money. It's about talking to the school teachers. It's about breaking the link between the tourist with money and the child, for example. So if you want to give something to kids, ask the community in advance how you can help them, and try and buy things locally. Don't bring your things from, UK or US, your spare laptop, etc., because it's very well meaning, but you can actually undermine the local economy. You can give them something that they're not able to maintain or fix, that isn't right for their particular circumstances. But local people know what they need. They know the answers. They know how you can help them. So we're very well-meaning, most of us. We don't think about our little interactions here or there, because it's not just you. There are thousands and thousands of people like you in so many destinations doing that same kind of behavior. And we're seeing now, aren't we, the bigger picture from those interactions.
I think, Danielle, you recently shared with me this Booking.com study that now we reach the same percentage of people who are aware about the impact of travel on these communities. We now reach the same number. So it was like 53% of the travelers care about how their travel impact the community, which is the same number of people who care about how their travel impact the environment, which I thought is a very interesting stat. I wonder, like, how did this happen? Do you have any hypotheses behind this study?
Yeah, sure. I can jump in if anyone else wants to as well. I read another study coming from Booking.com maybe 1 or 2 years before that said that people were actually starting to get frustrated hearing about sustainability in the carbon footprint space so much, but not knowing like what to do or how to make sustainable choices. And that's not to say that the carbon footprint is not an important topic. It absolutely is. And being responsible with environmentally how you travel is very important. But at the end of the day, the carbon emissions from the travel industry make up only 8% of the global carbon emissions. So to me, I think it's something that has developed out of a education that has continued to come also as people are also craving this type of travel. So from a pure demand, like consumer choice, actually the rise of Gen AI is pushing people to have more of these authentic experiences because they want something that's not recommended by one of the 5 million travel planners out there. So I think when these experiences that we're talking about are actually offline. So there's no way for them to be included in Gen I. That's what we're trying to fix to at least get them online. But so I think it's actually a consumer preference combined with this frustration of, hey, we know we want to do something, but how can we do it? Combined with maybe a bit of an awakening to say, Charlotte, I think you were mentioning this, like, wait, who owns my safari vehicle? And why am I meeting somebody from Kampala to go 9 hours to Western Uganda? And what about the millions of communities I'm passing along the way? So I think it's actually a combination of the demand of the market and consumer sentiment. But I'd love to hear what you guys think as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Natalie, do you have also some insights regarding this topic?
If you're talking about why are people seeking more community-based tourism, why do we see, the statistics rise in that? I think the market has got a bit sick of the highlights tour, the whistle stop, the must see, that kind of coming into a destination or a continent and being a skipping stone over the surface and not really, actually knowing that you've crossed a border because you've just taken so many flights and everywhere starts to look the same and you get home more exhausted because you've done more, traveling or than you have done seeing. So I think that there's that, the rise of social media and we're meant to be more connected. We're more disconnected than ever. So people want to take a holiday to slow down. So they want to take a holiday from those normal routines and rhythms of life and step into someone else's shoes and someone else's rhythms and norms of life. And that's where we get connection, humanity. You might not remember the name of the restaurant or where you took that photo in that monument, but you remember the taste of pho and you remember the lady that served you and you had a little chat or a giggle or you bought a deck of cards and you had the time to sit down and play, with other people in that cafe or restaurant. I think there's a really beautiful shift happening from a tourist to a traveler, that people want to be explorers of the world again, rather than just sit on a bus and zoom past and take a photo. And I think that's the hope that community-based tourism offers, is that, we can go back to exploring. We do have to slow down. You can't always post it on Instagram. It's not going to be, I think about Rome and everyone's like, oh, you have to go and see the Trevi Fountain. There's 2,000 fountains in Rome. Do you really need to see the Trevi one? Is suddenly everyone so excited about fountains? No, it's because that FOMO. And I think that FOMO has left us a bit empty. And so now we want to go back and how can I make sure that the dollars that I want to spend and I've worked hard to make an impact positively in someone else's life. I think we have a bit more of a consciousness that this money, whose pockets is it going into? And can I stand behind the choice that I'm making by supporting that? And I think it's a really beautiful change in a world that doesn't have so many beautiful changes sometimes. I think it's a really uplifting thing that we can look for, that people want to slow down, travel less, see more, feel more. Yeah, I think that's where we are. I don't know if it's age or demographics, as I see it young and old. I see, community-based tourism really popular with backpacker ages and nurses and university students. And my last trip, I took my 80-year-old mother and we traveled very slowly on train from the north to the south of Vietnam. And in 80 years, she was still squatting on beautiful plastic chairs, eating bun cha. So it's everywhere. And that's a great renaissance of travel, I think.
I can definitely relate to feeling a little bit more exhausted. I've also seen Rome and it was just like a checklist, like, okay, this is what I need to see. And I remember this fountain you mentioning, and it's kind of like you feel FOMO because everybody makes you feel like they post it on Instagram. And if you don't check all this kind of stuff. And unfortunately, you do miss out on probably maybe some really authentic experiences like cooking classes, right? Like these are stuff that maybe don't get so advertised, but then you actually meet the locals, you actually interact with them. They give you a very different flavor in how it might feel to be there, And recently I also started doing this switch. I was in Latin America maybe 4 months ago in Colombia, and our main focus was just no longer checking boxes, but try to see what the local communities can offer. And I have to say, we stayed for a month and it was absolutely wonderful. We met over 150 people, locals and travelers, and you really feel this difference. You feel energized coming back home, that you experience stuff that otherwise you wouldn't have, rather than just going through this checklist and just hacking it off. So I totally agree with that. And I really hope
human connection energizes you. Do not energize you. No one goes through an airport security and goes, oh my gosh, what an amazing experience that was, right? But, having a cup of tea with someone where you're watching the street goes past, that is the amazing experience. And for so long, we've kind of been fed this marketing that we need to go and we need to do this fast. In 14 days, we have to see the whole of Europe or the whole of Southeast Asia. Really? Just pick a place, sit down for a moment, breathe, watch. That's what gives you that energy and you feel so great afterwards. And, we might not all have the luxury to take, a month off, and it might be your only holiday that you can afford in a certain amount of, years. So you've really worked up to that. But we've got to ask ourselves what's really important to me and what's going to fill up my heart. And it's not 14 days and 14 cities, I don't think, in my opinion, my humble opinion.
All right. So we discussed a lot about sustainable tourism and what does that mean? And would love to hear maybe a proper definition from you, Charlotte. What does it mean to actually travel sustainably in your mind?
I think until now, if we talk about sustainability, people are just looking at their carbon footprint and then feeling guilty that they're flying. Unfortunately, we can't stop flying overnight. So it's about trying to reduce our flights if we possibly can. Let's have a longer holiday rather than have a weekend away or a week. Let's go away for as long as we can. And then while we are away, rather than go to 14 places in 14 days, let's stay 3 or 4 nights in a few locations, or even better, just go to one location and really have a deep experience. Because the advantage of doing that, leave alone the carbon footprint, is that you are really getting a sense of the place. You can meet local people and find out about their culture. You can learn a few words. You can try the local foods. You're spending more money in one place. So we're not trying to just minimize some of the negatives of tourism. We're actually trying to go a step further and positively impact. So local people get more benefit, and that's financial, emotional, social, and so on. And of course, we want to try and support the right projects as well. So I do a lot of work in conservation. If you can support something that's actively giving money or support in terms of resources or facilities to stop elephant poaching, for example, then that's another win as well. I think we have to acknowledge that it's still a fairly new topic in many people's eyes. So it's a journey and we can't fix everything overnight. So if we can just look at 1 or 2 of these angles as we're preparing to travel, then I think that we are going in the right direction. And we're all educating ourselves as we go along.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Danielle, you also mentioned some really good examples of how this sustainable tourism is actually affecting communities. Can you maybe give us also some other examples similar to what just Charlotte just mentioned about the elephants? Do you have other examples that pop up in your head?
Yeah, sure. So before I got down to Rwanda, as Charlotte mentioned, I was spending the last 2 weeks in Uganda, and I echo everything that she said. It's amazing. And if you go there, be careful because you might have to stay there. So I'm going back in 2 weeks. Let's see if I make it back to Berlin or not. That's how amazing it is. So I've met some incredible people, and but I started there at the Pearl of Africa Tourism Expo, where Charlotte and I actually met. And there is a big focus on the role that communities play in conservation. And so historically, Uganda has derived a lot of its tourism from gorilla trekking, where you go out west and hike with gorillas, and it's an amazing experience. In order to do that, the parks, and I think Uganda, Charlotte, you can correct me if I'm wrong, have 7 national parks, maybe more. 10?
10.
7? 10? Thank
10.
you, 10. 10 national parks. And so obviously conservation is a huge topic in Uganda. And so one of the things that has come up recently is helping connect conservation with community-based tourism efforts, because when you are living on the edge of a reserve and you are faced with poverty or food shortages, that's when you're kind of pushed to go poaching, right? Which obviously has a very negative impact on the conservation efforts in the whole ecosystem. But what community-based tourism has done is helped people see that, hey, tourists are actually coming into our areas to see the giraffes, to see the gorillas, to see the elephants. And so therefore, how can we safeguard these resources and bring more people in because we're benefiting from tourism? So that only happens when the community is actually participating or even better managing the local tourism. And so I've met the last 2 weeks with many, many communities who are doing this. And so I think, and there's many examples, not only here in Uganda, but also I've seen this in Thailand as well, where once the community is involved and asked to also protect and take care of the resources because of the tourism that can come because of that, some of the impacts are insane. I've heard about like lakes that were almost completely empty of fish being rejuvenated and now a source not only of tourism, but also for local fishermen. So this link between community-based tourism and conservation is very, very strong, and it becomes very authentic and a really amazing way of living. I think that's definitely something that as more and more stories like this start getting exposed and shared around the world, people are going to see how strong that can be.
That's a really good example. But to achieve that, I bet it's like super challenging as well. You mentioned like most of you, like shortage of electricity, the infrastructure doesn't support it. And I bet starting a company in this area where the infrastructure is just not there yet must be really, really tough. How was your experience so far? I would love to throw it in the round and just hear how is it to build things and be involved in such a industry. But yeah, maybe Daniela, since you were mentioning, would you like to continue on the challenges you've been facing so far?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to start. So absolutely, the infrastructure is a challenge. And Liz mentioned this as well, like access to basic things like power and water when we're also in an age of Gen AI can be tough, right? To understand that. So it's definitely a challenge. I think, so one of the things that we're trying to do with Aquera is really enter the market with a technology that actually respects that, right? So it's mobile first, offline as much as possible, and running as off of the cellular data that exists, right? So that's number one. But I think the other thing that we've been trying to do is really acknowledge the work that these efforts take, right? Whether it's infrastructure, whether it's getting the community buy-in. What I just said about the link between community and conservation, that doesn't happen from one day to the next, right? And so I was actually just having a conversation at breakfast today with somebody that leads Red Rocks Rwanda, which is a very, very well respected CBT here in Rwanda. And basically, when people can provide solutions that allow amazing leaders like Greg to just focus on the community efforts, that's how we can help them, right? So what I'm trying to do is take care of lack of access to technology and infrastructure by solving that, right? Or lack of access to training because you're in a village and not in Kampala with hospitality schools all around, by delivering that. So I think where organizations, where individuals can help is to help solve some of those challenges, to allow the folks that are building these amazing transformational businesses to just focus on that and just focus on mobilizing the community. Otherwise, it's too much. It's different than building a business out of Berlin. Berlin has a terrible cell network, but otherwise we have good infrastructure. So otherwise, I have an advantage be a Berlin-based founder versus a Western Rwanda business founder. So helping with those challenges to allow them to focus, I think, is key.
Can I add something, if that's okay? So I do a lot of training, digital marketing training and sustainable tourism training, and it's often in a modern Kampala hotel, but I've done a few training sessions out in the village. And of course, there isn't much in terms of training, so people flock to it. But the problem is there's not much follow-up. there's not a very supportive network for people to practice their skills, and there's very little mentoring as well. I know this is your area really, Sarah, with there's very little digital literacy. So you go in trying to teach digital marketing, but actually people don't really know how to use basic phone, the basics of their phone, and maybe they don't have access to a laptop. They have a smartphone, but they don't have a laptop, or so many other issues. It is difficult to train people at a local level and to keep them motivated as well, because if you're involved in community-based tourism, you really have to have a lot of stamina. You really have to commit for the long term, because it takes time to promote these organizations as well, because they may not be able to have the marketing skills to set up a website. And then they can have unrealistic expectations, thinking that tourists are going to come next week and that they're going to get a certain number every month and every week and so on. And so people start things and they stop them because they don't get the marketing and they don't get the support, and then they get disappointed because the tourists aren't coming, but tourist facility down the road is. So there's a lot involved in developing a successful CBT. I'm sure Natalie has got tons of experience on this. Perhaps she'd like to add something from your side of the world.
Me personally, I definitely resonate with what you're saying. And the only reason that we can be successful is that we have people that are deeply connected to the community. So they might be our employees, but they're either from that community originally, or they go out and work in that community just to be visible. So they're there on their laptop every day if they can get internet and power. But they're there talking to the community, because why we have such a long runway of 2 years of getting a community on board that they want tourism is because they've got to trust you. We don't speak the same language. I don't look the same. So we invest heavily of having people that are just building relationships, because that's the first thing. And then once you build relationships, then we can talk about sanitation, then we can talk about roads, and we can talk about water. But those things don't happen overnight. And I think one really important lesson that COVID taught us about community-based tourism is to try and equal out that over-reliance. We have these great, tourism businesses, but when COVID happened, no one could eat anymore. Guides didn't get paid. There was nothing. So how do we make it part of a resilient community is really, really key. So if tourism falls out tomorrow, or our brand Discover doesn't exist anymore, they still have other things going on that doesn't build that over-reliance on the tourist dollar, because it can be quite fickle. What was in fashion yesterday might not be in fashion tomorrow. So how do we make sure that we have that community self-sufficient, and we invest in education, infrastructure to make sure that it is truly sustainable, and we're not just there a flash in the pan and then it's all over again tomorrow. That's the only thing you can just invest in really great people that spend so much time building relationships.
I love what you say about investing 2 years in building relationships. That's so, so important.
It's so
just
key.
Listening.
I worked in a village during COVID in the north of Bali. Ubud is really, really tourist central hot. But just outside of it, it's really rural and they really need some support. And the first thing we did, the first 2 years, is all we did was help them fix a water pump. That's what they wanted. It started with a water pump and ended up in a absolutely gorgeous tented camp that's run by 95% of the local community. The food is grown there, farm to table, but it took, an immense, we're at 5 years now and we're still, working on it. But the reward is it's so worth it, because, the community gets to flourish, and it all started with the water pump. That was it.
Nice story.
Yeah, thank you so much. What about you, Liz? What are the challenges you've been facing?
The challenge is really similar, but I want to talk because I have a small community in Ecuador called Oyacachi. This is a really amazing community because it's in the middle for two provincias or two states, something like that, but it's in the middle to cross the Andean, to cross to Amazon. I met this community 15 years ago. And actually, I have a good relationship with some people in the community. And it's like Natalie and Charlotte said, build relationships, talk, spend time with the people, try to connect create a good environment, create a good connection, good networking. For example, the last year I looked for some NGO to help with money to teach the community about some special programs. But actually, this community has a really, really important empower. All the community is really must to do what I have in the community, have all the information, have all the tools, all the community care, because this space is really special, because actually Oyakachi give water, clean water for Quito, the capital, and some communities around. And for this reason, it's really important for protect the forest and the paramos. And yeah, when you, for example, in my case, when I saw this type of communities, I really feel we are in the best way, in the correct way. For example, maybe when you can meet some people or another small communities in the same way, or maybe you can do similar things, maybe actually you have the tools, you have the information, you have the connection, is really more easy. And for example, for our case with the tour operator, maybe can put all the information or put the programs of the experience for sale and help. And you know all the paths for this community, have the information, have the friends, have all the tools. I think it's really important, because in our case, in tourism, the connection, the lasting connection is the important base for everything, because the people trust us. Maybe you can change some small things or help with the small things.
Yeah, thank you so much for this input as well. Daniela, I know you need to leave in a minute. If there is one thing that you would like for the people to get out of this conversation, what we had today, what would that be?
I think I would say look for ways to positively impact communities with your travel. I know it's new. I know it's hard. It's frustrating. It can seem like you want to help, but you don't know how to. But there are tour operators. There are community-based tourism organizations, cooperatives in certain countries. So if you're going to a country, maybe Google community-based tourism Thailand, you'll find a group of CBTOs there that are ready to connect with you. So jump into this space. Like Natalie mentioned, it's an amazing, amazing way to experience the world. I have full confidence that this market segment is going to explode. So try and get to it while it's still not so known, but there you can find it today. And I would encourage you to try on your next trip to at least sit with one community, work with one of their experiences, or sit in one of their accommodations and check out CBT, because I don't think you'll go back once you experience it.
Very, very well said. What about you, Natalie? What message would you give?
I believe in starting small and watching a snowball. So I think if you're about to head off to a destination, make a commitment that you're going to eat something and learn something that impacts the community in a positive way. So whether that's a chai wala in the morning or learning to weave in the afternoon, pick two things. And because there's a bit of fear about, maybe stepping outside the hotel. Am I going to get sick? Am I going to get bombarded with questions? Put that aside. Just start. On my trip, I'm going to eat something local and I'm going to learn something, and you will find that it opens up so many doors.
Very well said. Liz, you have something to add?
Yeah, of course. For my side, it's really important to connect with your history or the history for the place. It's really important. Maybe you can talk with the old people or your grandparents, because you have a really huge information, and then you can take this information to share with another people. And when you travel for the another country, maybe you can compare, and it's really similar.
Oh, that's so sweet. Charlotte?
Yeah, I would encourage people to slow down and try not to do everything any destination offers. If you come to Uganda to see the gorillas and you might go on safari afterwards again, you might like the country so much that you want to come back on a second visit. Why try and do everything in one holiday? You can come back and see another part of the country, or see it through the cultural lens rather than the wildlife one. So there are many different ways to explore a destination. And I think that, there's lots of ideas out there. Honestly, people are looking for sustainable tours. It's not always easy to find what you want yet, because I think there's this radical shake-up happening within the tourism industry. But if you look for a sustainable tour operator, look for a badge of accreditation if you possibly can. Look for something like Travel Life or Tour Cert or GSTC certified or something like that, because there is a lot of greenwashing. Don't just immediately believe everything that people say. look for reports, for example, on their websites. A sustainability report could be a good indicator. Ecotourism in Kenya, for example, do some sustainability reporting. So this is another thing that we're going through at the moment is people are interested in sustainability and responsible travel, and some people are using the words without actually delivering on that promise. So interesting times.
Totally agree. Well, I want to thank you again, all of you, for the very interesting insights. You definitely educated me, and I hope that also our listeners maybe learned a thing or two that wasn't on their radar before. So I would love to thank each one of you. You're definitely leading and doing things that is driving the world forward in very different aspects. Thank you so much for joining me today as well. And I feel very honored to be able to host such an amazing people like yourself, and wish you all the best in your endeavors. And thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
your questions.
Take care. Have a nice day.